Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Posted. When we left off, there's been some, it looks like, bullying happening with the Post-it notes. So we know the one girl got in trouble for it. We know that Ruth found a picture of a moose strapped to the top of a car with X's on its eyes, sort of like a dead moose strapped to the top of a car, which is mean. We don't know at all what's happening with Wolf's Post-it notes. They seem to be bullying in nature, and Ruth seems to know about them, but Wolf won't share it. And when we literally left off, Frost was asking his mom about whether or not she was popular in school. So that's where we're going to start up. Well, I had a fair number of friends, Mom said, and a lot of people signed my yearbook, and I wasn't really picked on. Does that count as being popular? I thought about the red letter L in my locker, the cartoon moose tied to the roof of the car, the notes and the nudges, all the kids like Jason and Cameron giving kids like Wolf and Dee Dee and me a hard time. Maybe Mom was popular, or maybe it was just different when she was growing up. What about Dad? I asked. Mom nearly choked on her water. Your father? Oh, God, no. He was never popular. Not that that mattered to him. In fact, that was one of the things I liked about him at first. The fact that he was always in his little world and he didn't care at all about anybody or what anybody thought about him. It sort of made him mysterious. I never thought of my father as mysterious. What is mysterious about a man who went to work in boxer shorts and drinks orange juice straight out of the carton? But I could easily picture him in my own world. You mean he didn't have any friends? There were popular people, or there were people he hung out with sometimes, but no, I'm not sure if he had any true friends until he met me. And when he did, Mom paused and put down her fork and leaned across the table. Is there something going on at school, something you'd like to talk to me about? I pictured my dad working up the courage to come sit at Mom's table, even if that's how it happened. I mean, I wondered what her friends thought when they saw him standing there. If they let him have an empty seat or pushed him away. I wonder what they called him behind his back when he left, what kind of notes there were left on his locker. No, I said, but I knew that wasn't going to be enough for her. My mother's looks could pull confessions out of hardened criminals. It's just that there's this new kid at school and she's having a hard time fitting in. I figured I could start with Rose and work my way up. She? Mom said with a sly grin like she just cracked the code. I put down my fork. You know what? It's not a big deal. Forget I said something. No, tell me. I want to know, because if it's about a girl, maybe I can help you, Mom said. Yeah, right, because you're such an expert on relationships, I said. My eyes dropped immediately to my plate. It just slipped out. Words like that just slip out sometimes. There was a really long pause, the old quiet creeping in, and I looked up to see her frowning. I'm sorry, I didn't mean. No, you did, she said, clearly hurt, but it's okay. What I meant was, I remember what it's like to be 13 and wanting to have people like you, and it's not easy. She reached across the table and took her hold of my wrist. But I'll tell you this, kiddo. Being liked isn't close to the same thing as being loved. Do you understand that? I nodded. She took that as a cue to let go. I think the next time I'll boil the noodles a little bit longer, she said, and she pushed her plate away. After the table was cleared, I let Mom help me with homework. I didn't actually need help, but I could tell that it made her happy getting involved, and I felt like a jerk for what I had said. We built an intercontinental ballistic missile out of paper towel rolls for my history presentation. Wolf was in charge of the poster because he had much neater handwriting, and complete with the letters USSR, which, as it turned out, didn't have the word Russia in it at all. When she finally said goodnight after asking me again if there was anything else I wanted to talk about, I waited for her door to shut, and then I snuck past it down the hall. The office at the new house was nothing like the study at the old one that had tall bookshelves and mahogany rolling desks filled with unpaid bills, where my father would sit for hours writing his articles and ignoring the world. The office at the new place was actually just the extra bedroom, complete with a daybed, a scratched-up student desk that Mom found at Goodwill, and a couple of IKEA shelves lined with whatever cheap books Mom and I picked out at library sales. We used to have a lot more books once, but Dad took most of them with him, minus the Robert Frost, which was mine now. Mom got to keep the photo albums, though. There weren't a ton of pictures, mostly family vacations to Cancun and Canada. One album was filled with pictures of me running around the house in my diaper or smearing carrots in my hair. You're never more photogenic, apparently, than when you're half naked and covered in pureed vegetables. My toddler years were equally well documented, probably because I was an only child, and after the pictures sort of trailed off. You take more pictures when people are having a good time than a bad time. Next to the album sat what I came for, my mother's high school yearbook. It had a layer of dust from the new house settling on top of it, with layers of dust carried over from the old house. There were 4 of them, and I had seen them before. For a school project on family trees once, I needed a picture of my parents as kids. Mom was pretty easy because Grandma had thousands of pictures. Most of them were Polaroid instants with glossy black backs and white frames. But for Dad's, we actually had to scan his his freshman yearbook picture in one of those yearbooks and blow it up. I slid the first year of Midvale High's Reflections off the shelf and opened it to the inside cover, reading the messages that were scrawled there, and she was right. It was full of signatures. My mother was awesome and the coolest and totally rad. There were phone numbers from boys named Dan and Jacob, asking my mom to call sometime over the summer. Someone who had the nickname of KK said she'd always remember being something called the Marshmallow Surprise. Another girl named Sarah wrote, "I'm sick of not having the courage to be an absolute nobody." I'm guessing it was from a book, but I don't know if it qualified as an amorphism or not. On the inside back cover was more of the same. The whole thing was filled with signatures. She was really popular. I took the next year off the shelf, looked for more familiar names. KK was there again, and Sarah, and some others. The pages were filled, but the handwriting was bigger. Some drawings took up a good amount of space. My mother was still cool, and she would be missed. But her junior year, there was less messages. Sarah wrote a long note that took up half the back page, telling my mother what a good friend she was and how next year would be different, but she didn't say how. By her senior year, the number of signatures in my mother's yearbook had dwindled to fewer than 10. The girl named Sarah signed simply "Good luck out there." There was a note from someone named Mr. Fieldman, who was probably a teacher. On the cover page, there was an angry tornado of blue ink, clearly clawing clean through the page. Something had once been written there, something my mother, I guess, was not interested in seeing ever again. On the back inside, there was only one name, and it was my father's, following a short message that was 2 sticky notes worthy words. Love always, it promised. Yeah, it mattered. Who signed your yearbooks mattered. I sat with the last year in my lap until I heard a sound from the hallway, and I silently slid all 4 books back into place. I waited for my mother to close the bathroom door before sneaking back to my bedroom and shutting off the light. And I lay there in the darkness looking at the ceiling, thinking about my mother's yearbooks, the fact that there were fewer and fewer signatures each year, and wondering how something like that happens, and how much, if anything, it had to do with dating Dad. I never heard her talk about anybody from high school. I had never heard her mention Sarah or KK or anybody whose names were in that cover. Most of the friends she had now came from college, or they were people she knew from work. Where did they go? Did they leave her? Did she leave them? Where was her tribe? I mean, maybe that's how it works. Maybe the people you know when you're a kid are destined to be a bunch of signatures in your yearbook when you grow up. I don't want to believe it, though. I mean, I thought about Bench sitting on the bus next to me and Dee Dee reaching out his front pocket for his dice, and Wolf bent over one of his models, putting the pieces in place, and now Rose standing at the edge of our table looking at the empty seat. I thought about Dad reaching for the salt and having to run out of things to say. How do you keep someone from leaving when it's clear they don't want to stay with you? I bent over and grabbed my jeans from the floor, pulling out the note that I found in my locker this morning. Not the one that had been stuck to the outside. This was the one that I found inside. It was shoved into my locker. I found it right before dismissal, and I knew exactly who put it there. I recognized the handwriting. It said, "I'm sorry about lunch." Bench always wrote in all capital letters. And then there was a little smaller underneath. It said, "It's not about you." It wasn't about me, sure. But yet I'm still the one who rode the bus home alone. The next chapter, the offer. The day that Wolf and I nearly blew up his house was the same day that my parents' divorce finally went through. They had been split city for a while. I mean, I'd already visited Dad in Tallahassee, but there were questions involving my father's income and the custody arrangements and who got the leftovers in the fridge or whatever. My mother refused to talk to me about details, and I didn't ask. If it happened to come up, she simply said, "I'm working on it," and let it go. And I let it go too, but finally the papers came through and Mom had to visit the lawyer to sign on the dotted line. So instead, I went to Wolf's to hang out. But finally the papers came through and Mom had to visit the lawyer to sign on the dotted line, so I went to Wolf's to hang out. Dee Dee was out of town, and Bench had baseball practice for the entire afternoon, and it left only the 2 of us. There was nothing wrong with the 2 sometimes. I mean, it wasn't 4, of course, but spending the afternoon with Wolf was definitely better than sitting home eating Captain Crunch straight out of the box and watching SpongeBob reruns in my underwear. It was too hot to be outside, so we holed ourselves up in the room, underneath the plastic jets and painted starships, listening to music and flipping through the impressive comic collection. It was big enough that he had to keep them in a gigantic plastic tub under his bed. None of them were in sleeves, which was more like something Dee Dee would do. Wolf didn't see the value in books beyond what he got from reading them, and he was also strictly a Marvel guy, but I didn't hold it against him. We sat and read and ate and occasionally said something to each other. After an hour, we practically burned through an entire bag of Cheetos. Wolf held the last one up for inspection. "Turds," he said. "What?" Cheetos. Cheetos look like turds, little cheese turds, especially the stubby ones. I never noticed that before. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed with a copy of X-Men number 25 spread out in front of him. This was the one where Wolverine had his adamantium sucked out of his pores by Magneto. Brutal stuff. Good stuff. I looked at the Cheeto like it was some divine artifact worthy of a museum. He wasn't wrong. They did sort of look like that. I always imagined them more like tree roots. When I was little, I thought they were supposed to look like toes. Cheetos, Wolf said. I'm pretty sure nobody's toes look like this, I said. I think my grandmother's toes look like this, Wolf said. He popped the crunchy cheese turd in his mouth and started chewing. I'm pretty sure you've ruined Cheetos for me for life, I said. Wolf gave me a gigantic grin with bright orange mush smeared across his teeth. Ooh, really? You're disgusting. I buried my face back into the Incredible Hulk. The ticked-off green behemoth had just ripped a helicopter out of the sky and was tying its propeller like shoelaces. There were days I wished I could do that. I tied a couple of kids' arms behind them and hang them up to the flagpole so everybody could point and laugh when they walked by. So it's like official, Wolf said, his teeth no longer orange. Your parents. He made some kind of chopping motion with his hands. Well, they aren't being beheaded, if that's what you're asking. They're just getting divorced, I said. Wolf was just staring at me, though. What? Nothing. It's kind of a big deal, right? He was serious. This was the first time one of us had brought up our parents' divorce or how nobody in our right mind should get married. You should find people who share your interests, and Wolf and I were both interested in complaining about the poor choices of our parents, primarily in each other. You think I should be pissed off or something? Wolf shrugged. You're not? I would be. I shrugged back. Honestly, it's been so long coming, I just don't care anymore. But that wasn't completely true. And we're going to stop there. Until next time.